secularization theory, in all fairness, has failed. Secularization theory propounded that modernization necessarily leads to the decline in religion, both in society and in individuals. It cannot be said that modernization does not have secularization effects, but it has equally spurned anti-secularization movements. Secularization theory has a fundamental fault. Secularization is perceived to be happening in the societal level and not at the level of the individual. Societal secularization was not essentially linked to the individual. Actually, that is the truth. If you take any history connected with any nation, any century, that is the real truth. This secularization theory applied at the level of the nation states presupposes two dimensions: hard secular and soft secular. Why I am going to this aspect is because religion as such is said to be secular formal, in secular form in anywhere in the world. At least they pretend to be. That's why when we think about religion connected with politics and with human rights, we have to go far beyond the history to find out how and why religion and politics are blended together. Hard secular, that is the former one, negates the role of the religion. It considers that religion is subordinate to the state or does not acknowledge the existence or importance of religion or religious institutions. Communist Europe is an excellent example of this. Communist Russia or East Germany did not acknowledge the existence of religion. But these societies were deeply religious in nature. Despite the 70-year experiment in communism, Russian Orthodox Church was strong and deeply rooted in the culture, and an upsurge was witnessed after the fall of the USSR. What illustrated here was how religion represented authenticity and rushed in to fill the gap of secular nationalism. And the latter, that is the soft secularism. It is probably very complicated in its nature. On one hand, it acknowledges the existence of religion and its importance, and at the same time, it denies its privileges and does not discriminate according to religion. Soft secularism is a hallmark of democracies in the world. Soft secularism ensures the right to religious freedom as enshrined in constitutional guarantees, but does not ensure the right to exercise this freedom without fear. The recent spiral of violence in India could be cited as an example. The right to religious freedom is enshrined in the Constitution of India under Part 3, Fundamental Rights Articles 25 to 28 and Article 15. The secular nature of the state is thus demonstrated in these articles very clearly. The secular state is a far cry from a secular society, to be specific. The delicate balance the state has to maintain is of the constitutional and legal obligation to religious freedom, and on the other, ensuring justice, equality, liberty, and fraternity as enshrined in the preamble. The preamble talks of a secular society and the Constitution a secular state. You have to watch, you have to see that difference. It talks about a secular society and the Constitution a secular state. But the nature of a secular state does not ensure the existence of secular societies. The Constitution of United States of America is also an example of how soft secularism is built into a nation state. Amendment 1 of the Bill of Rights clearly states that The Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercises thereof. There is no society or social cohesive movements in the world that can be called truly secular. In order for a society to be secular, the society then should be anti-religious. No society has been anti-religious. Political ideology and religion has remained always separate. Political ideology did sometimes work on the social level but did not percolate onto the individual level. In both forms of secularism, that is hard and soft, religious freedom has been ensured at state level, thereby the individuals and not by the society we live. Thus, the modern nation states, by the inherent nature in their constitution, ensures secular state and does not put in place mechanisms to ensure secular societies. This demonstrates the deepest possible link between politics and religion. The delinking of state and religion as inspired from the age of enlightenment provides for the background for misunderstanding or understanding the importance of religion in contemporary politics. The word religion is meant to imply an institutional framework within which specific theological doctrines and practices are advocated and pursued, usually among a community of like-minded believers. We have to underline that, like-minded believers, not people. In the 18th century, science won over God, and religion and faith were put at test. Enlightenment thinkers abandoned religion into two distinct phases. The first was the assumption that the devotional matters and the matters of the church were deemed medieval, and the new spirit of inquiry prohibited the sustained interest in religion, religious institutions, and even the role of religious motivations in secular affairs. Secondly, any spiritual explorations were denied intellectual respectability, and religious motivations in secular affairs were dismissed as per pretense. This phasing out of religion coincided with two nation-making projects, the American Revolution and the French Revolution. Why the two revolutions are important? Because two important changes were affected by them. American Revolution challenged the monarchy and established democracy. It demonstrated that the British throne was expendable, and French Revolution sounded the death bell for the unilateralist powers of the church. The concept of liberty, equality, justice, and fraternity were imposed on the new nations, thus relegating religion to the background. But the sway of religion in individual lives endured, a fact that is demonstrated by the importance given to religious freedom in the First Amendment of Constitution of the United States of America, and the spirit in Article 4 of Declaration of Right of Man in 1789. Religion is seen increasingly in the West as a theological set of issues, rather than as a profoundly political influence in public life. This also is to be underlined and thought of. In many areas of the world, religion should be seen as a central pillar maintaining power of any ruler, a major pole in determining the people's loyalty, and as a key ingredient in determining a nation's stability or instability. Thus, the understanding of religion in contemporary politics was highly polarized and greatly limited as the secularization theory kicks in the form of secular reductivism, as Edward Luttwak describes it. The most glaring example he quotes is of the Iranian Revolution. The intelligence community refused to take into stock the religious movements and personalities involved in just before the revolution. Religion was relegated and was considered mere sociology. Religion, therefore, becomes the missing dimensions to thinkers in the West. There has been considerable effort put into the locate religion within the space of contemporary politics. The liminal space religion occupies is a space that is neither within the state nor an aspect of the international state system, but animates both. And coming to the through politics, through religion, when we come to the political situation that creates or that counts or that makes the nation, whether we should go, the nation should go together, or there should be factionalism, there should be fundamentalism. Now coming to the stage of politics, that is, the global political order has changed considerably over the past decade. And the emergency period after, there's a governance has been changed from Mrs. Indira Gandhi to the Janata Party. A new government was taken over, and some sort of conflicts between the society, between the parties, political parties have taken place, and the murder of Mrs. Indira Gandhi. Again, conflict between the nations, and the murder of Rajiv Gandhi. And of course, Ayodhya issues, Godhra issues, a lot of other issues which shook the country. There has been a study matter for the conflict resolution as well as human rights issues. Religion, as it occurs, is not the primary factor in deadly conflicts. I have already mentioned about it, because cultural and class issues always been based on religions and religious issues. The Catholic Church dramatically changed after the Second Vatican Council in the early 1960s under the directions of Pope John Paul. The Catholic Church changed its policy from being accepting the status quo to a major force of change, stressing on the importance of social justice. The strength of the Catholic Church emerges from being it a transnational faith with more than 1 billion followers worldwide. The Catholic Church is a de facto political party with high discipline in the ranks of priests and other serving churches. The participation of the Holy See in international legal instrument is illustrative of the fact that of the centrality of moral issues in world politics. Henry Wooster provides an analysis of how the Catholic Church became involved in the 1986 revolution in the Philippines that saw the end of the reign of the constitutional authoritarianism of Marcos. Wooster is of the opinion that the Catholic Church would have remained aloof from the political crisis evolving in Philippines but for the Second Vatican Council. It gave the Church moral legitimacy to act as a force for social justice, by extension influence the human rights discourse that afflicted the conflict. This was complemented with the Catholic Bishops' Conference held in 1968, which broadened the definition of sin. It was expanded from the realm of the individual, that of economic and political structures that violate the dignity of human being as propounded in the Gospels, thus eliminating the difference between the social and spiritual. This enlarged interpretation of sin obligated the Church to aid people in resolving situations in which exploitation took place. It was a very, very important decision taken by the Roman Church. Thus, development and justice were interpreted as difficult tasks. Among other reasons, one of the major factors for the Church to get involved was the absence of credible leadership, leading to Cardinal Sin stepping in to be the credible opposition. The Church with its vast organizational, communication, and logistic infrastructure, was one of the strongest institutions, thus forcing it into being a political force. Contrary to the assertions that religion would disappear in the face of modernization, religion, it has emerged into political and social consciousness internationally. Religion is indeed substantially involved in contemporary politics around the world. Now we are coming to the political aspect. When compared to the religion, how the political aspect is influential and how it has to be resolved with the human rights activists. This upsurge of religion in the late 20th and early 21st century has affected personal and political life. Two examples of the Catholic Church and Swami Jayendra Saraswati that demonstrated the intractable link between politics and religion at an institution and individual level. Where politics failed, religion was able to step in and resolve the issues. This also has to be, we have to think about it also. When there is a political unrest, religion interferes and unrest is being resolved. I'm not telling about the recently Kerala has also, in that way, we were also seeing that some kind of religions, I won't say it is religious, religions coming into politics and finding some solutions. Purely it is controversial, so there is no point in going into the deeper things as everyone knows it. Politics, religion, and human right will not delve into the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. We all know the central tenet of the declaration. What I am going to propound next would demonstrate how much religion and political discourse shape, or rather in my opinion distort, tenets of the declaration. Human rights cannot truly be global unless it goes deeply local, unless it addresses plural philosophies and beliefs that sometimes collide with or appear to resist its appeal to universal norms. If international human rights standards have a claim to universality, their relevance must be demonstrated in all contexts, and especially where religion determines state behavior. 50 years after its proclamation of Universal Declaration of Human Rights has become the sacred text of a worldwide secular religion, wrote Michael Intief, a Canadian parliamentarian and academician. This new frontier, however, is collecting with the return of the religious in many societies, the featuring the reassertion of more dogmatic or conservative forms of beliefs inside and outside of mainstream religious denominations, as noted earlier in my speech. Worldwide, if the human rights, if we have to protect human rights, it should start from a person to the society, society to the state, state to the country, country to the world. In this urgent mode, human rights activists are on a constant firefighting mode. On the one hand, rights activists should more aggressively stand up for religious freedom and the rights of believers in secular and religious societies alike. On the other hand, they should directly oppose pressures from religious groups that seek to dilute or eliminate rights protections for women, sexual minorities, atheists, religious dissenters, and so on, that such religious groups view as inconsistent with fundamental religion's teachings and deeply held feelings or beliefs. In the 70s and the 80s, religious and human rights groups shared many objectives, reflecting a common conviction to the universality of the human rights message and its grounding in the traditions of most religions, philosophies, and civilizations. religion-based traditionalism seemed on the wane, and culturalism, the black boxing of cultures as exclusive identity reference, were usurped by the religious doctrine. Enlightenment project has failed, and so-called liberal democracies and liberal democratic capital has produced the opposite effect. Religion and religious discourse has rebounded and now forms the central tenet of politics in most countries in the world, with the exception of Western Europe. When religion and nation state collide, the first casualty is human rights. However, the relationship between religion and politics has been ambivalent in equal measure. In some states, they complement each other in terms of outcomes, and in certain aspects, they each occupy the extreme fringes of the ideological spectrum. We have not seen the worst yet. The 21st century may choose to be religious or not. In the nexus between politics and religion, something will get relegated, and that is the human and his rights. Thank you.